They asked me to do it, and I was anxious to do some live appearances. You know, it'd been a long time since I've been on stage in front of anybody live. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to get in front of the people. Well, I just do whatever I feel on stage.
They said Elvis died too young, but what he left behind? That's where the real story begins.
In 15 years, it's hard to comprehend that happening. A live concert, to me, is exciting because of all the electricity that's generated in the crowd and on stage. So I just try to stay in shape all the time.
Because buried beneath the glitter, the jumpsuits, and the heartbreak is a fortune so vast, it didn't just support his family, it transformed them. Did his ex-wife really cash in? What about the daughter who once claimed she was flat broke? Or the granddaughter suddenly thrust into the spotlight? If you thought Elvis Presley's story ended in 1970, think again. What he left behind made his family filthy rich, but not in the way you'd expect. We're peeling back the layers of a legacy the world thinks it knows, but only a few have ever truly understood. Elvis wasn't as rich as you think. In the public's imagination, Elvis Presley lived and died as one of the wealthiest performers on earth. The rhinestone suits, the private jets, the Cadillac fleet. But the truth is far more complicated and far less glamorous. At the time of his death in 1977, Elvis's net worth was shockingly low for someone of his superstardom. So, where did it all go? A huge chunk of the blame lands on one man, Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's longtime manager. Parker took an astonishing 50% of Elvis's earnings, an arrangement virtually unheard of in modern entertainment. He also kept Elvis locked into restrictive deals that benefited studios, venues, and Parker himself more than they ever did the star. Licensing rights, international royalties, publishing control. Most of it slipped through Elvis's hands. By the time he realized how much he was being shortchanged, it was too late. Elvis never toured outside of North America. That wasn't a creative decision, it was financial manipulation. Colonel Parker, who was not a U.S. citizen and lacked a passport, allegedly refused to let Elvis tour internationally for fear his own immigration status would be exposed. That choice alone cost Elvis hundreds of millions in potential global touring revenue. Meanwhile, Elvis continued to perform in Las Vegas under grueling contracts that padded Parker's pockets while wearing out the star. The spending didn't help. Elvis lived large. He bought cars for friends, gave away jewelry, and reportedly spent over $1 million a year maintaining Graceland. His generosity was legendary, but it drained his accounts. There was no trust fund, no diversified portfolio, just Elvis's ever-shrinking bank balance, his Memphis mansion, and a series of high-cost habits that kept the money flowing in and out. When he died at 42, Graceland was crumbling under its own expenses. The estate was bringing in only a fraction of what it owed. The home's upkeep alone cost over $500,000 a year. Taxes were piling up. Royalties from Elvis's music were still trickling in, but most of the lucrative contracts had long since been signed away. To many, it looked like the Presley fortune had burned out as quickly as Elvis's candle. And yet, even in death, there was something still alive in the Presley name, something raw, electric, and oddly untouched potential. Because while Elvis himself may not have left behind a massive pile of money, he left behind something that money couldn't buy. A brand, a myth, a global obsession. And someone in his orbit was about to see that for exactly what it was, the key to turning the king's fading legacy into a financial empire. What came next wasn't a stroke of luck. It was a risky decision that defied every expert and built an empire out of a crumbling mansion. Priscilla Presley's billion-dollar pivot. When Elvis died in 1977, few people could have predicted who would step up to protect his legacy. Not a music mogul, not a lawyer, not even a family member written into his will. It was his ex-wife, Priscilla Presley, a woman many thought would quietly exit stage left. Instead, she made a bold move that would alter the Presley empire forever. At the time of Elvis's death, his estate was barely hanging on. Graceland, the king's beloved Memphis mansion, was hemorrhaging money. The annual upkeep exceeded $500,000, and with minimal cash flow from his record deals and limited royalties, the estate was inching toward bankruptcy. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father and the estate's original executor, tried to keep things afloat. But when Vernon passed away in 1979, everything nearly collapsed. That's when Priscilla stepped in. Though divorced from Elvis for years, Priscilla was appointed co-executor alongside the estate's financial advisors. What she saw was grim: taxes, lawsuits, unpaid maintenance, and very few options. The Presley estate was teetering on a cliff. Many urged her to sell Graceland. Real estate developers were already circling. Bankers told her to cut losses. The idea of turning the property into a public venue was laughed off as a desperation play. But Priscilla didn't listen. Instead of selling off Graceland, she decided to gamble everything on it. In 1982, against the advice of nearly every financial consultant involved, she opened the gates of Graceland to the public. At the time, the idea of turning a celebrity's home into a museum was nearly unheard of, especially for someone who had died less than 5 years earlier. Critics called it tacky. Elvis purists thought it was sacrilege. Even some of Elvis's family members were hesitant. But once the doors opened, the public came, and they didn't stop. Graceland became a phenomenon. People flew in from around the world just to walk the same halls, see the gold records, touch the front gate. Tours sold out. Merchandise flew off the shelves. Within the first year, Graceland was generating millions. Within 5 years, it was pulling in over $10 million annually, placing it among the most visited homes in the United States, second only to the White House. From that success, Priscilla helped form Elvis Presley Enterprises, EPE, a brand management company tasked with overseeing everything related to Elvis's legacy: his image rights, music licensing, merchandising, and global branding. EPE exploded in value. They inked deals with record labels, fashion brands, and even film producers. Elvis merchandise hit shelves again. His face was suddenly everywhere, on lunchboxes, t-shirts, mugs, and TV specials. The estate's value began to skyrocket. The Presley brand was no longer fading. It was thriving. And here's the twist. Priscilla didn't take a direct salary from any of it, at least not at first. She wasn't a beneficiary in Elvis's will. They had already divorced by the time he passed. Legally, she had no claim to his estate. But her business acumen and stewardship earned her equity, influence, and eventually compensation from EPE's ongoing success. More importantly, she preserved everything for the one person who was named in the will, Lisa Marie Presley. By the time Lisa Marie came of age, the estate that had once been worth just a few million was valued at over $100 million. All of it traceable back to that single decision: don't sell Graceland. Open it. But with that fortune came something even harder to manage than money: expectation. And when it was finally time for Lisa Marie to take the reins, what she did with the Presley empire would leave even her inner circle stunned. Heiress to a fortune and debt. When Lisa Marie Presley turned 25 in 1993, She didn't just receive birthday wishes, she inherited an empire. As Elvis's only child and the sole heir to his estate, she was handed control of a fortune estimated to be worth around $100 million. That included Graceland, the Elvis Presley Enterprises brand, and rights to her father's name, image, and a portion of his music catalog. It was more than money. It was a cultural legacy, a sacred responsibility, a brand synonymous with American music history. But Lisa Marie's relationship with that inheritance would soon become a cautionary tale, one defined by risky decisions, legal battles, and a fortune that seemed to shrink with every passing year. In 2004, just over a decade after taking control of the estate, Lisa Marie made a move that shocked those around her. She sold 85% of Elvis Presley Enterprises to businessman Robert F.X. Sillerman for approximately $100 million. On paper, it looked like a smart deal. She retained ownership of Graceland and its artifacts while freeing herself from the operational burdens of the business. But what looked like liberation would prove disastrous. Much of that money, millions of dollars, went into a mix of high-risk ventures that didn't pay off. Sillerman's own company, CKX Inc., collapsed within years. Elvis's image and licensing rights were no longer under her full control. Worse, Lisa Marie's personal finances began to unravel behind the scenes. Real estate deals soured. Bad investments drained her liquidity. And while Graceland still generated money, the revenue was far less than the fortune she had once controlled. By 2018, Lisa Marie's financial troubles exploded into public view. Court documents revealed she was $16 million in debt, including $10 million in unpaid taxes, nearly $500,000 in credit card debt, and millions lost to failed business ventures. But that was only the surface. Lisa Marie filed a $100 million lawsuit against her former business manager, Barry Siegel, accusing him of reckless mismanagement and fraud. According to the lawsuit, Siegel had wholly failed to discharge his duties and had negligently mishandled her finances, including the disastrous sale of Elvis Presley Enterprises. She alleged he had used her assets to enrich himself, burned through over $100 million, and even let her mortgage fall into default. Siegel denied the claims, insisting Lisa Marie had led an unsustainable lifestyle filled with excessive spending. He countersued for unpaid fees, painting her not as a victim, but as a reckless spender. Private jets, luxury homes, extravagant shopping, it all became fodder in court, and the Presley fortune was suddenly the center of a tabloid storm. The situation spiraled. Lisa Marie's financial condition wasn't just concerning, it was tragic. For someone born into cultural royalty, the fall from grace was deeply public, and it highlighted a brutal truth. Managing a legacy isn't the same as preserving it. In the hands of someone who never asked for that burden, even a $100 million inheritance could vanish almost overnight. Yet, for all the turmoil, Lisa Marie remained fiercely protective of her father's legacy. She refused to sell Graceland, even as her debts mounted. She appeared at anniversaries, oversaw exhibits, and maintained her role as a cultural steward, even while her own financial world was falling apart. And then, in 2023, Lisa Marie's life was cut short by a sudden cardiac arrest at age 54. Her death added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled inheritance, because now the fortune and the controversy would pass on once again. What followed was a battle no one expected, a generational clash over trust, legacy, and the true price of being born into Elvis Presley's shadow. The granddaughter who took the throne. In January 2023, tragedy struck again. Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's only child, died suddenly at the age of 54. The king's direct bloodline had taken another hit. But while the headlines focused on the grief, something else was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. The future of the Presley empire was being redefined. At the center of it all stood Riley Keough, Lisa Marie's eldest daughter and Elvis's first grandchild. At 33, she was already an accomplished actress and model with credits in indie films and award-winning series. But now, she was facing a role no script could prepare her for: the new face of the Elvis Presley estate. According to Lisa Marie's will, updated in 2016, Riley and her late brother Benjamin were named as co-trustees, replacing Priscilla Presley. This amendment was not without controversy. In fact, within days of Lisa Marie's passing, Priscilla challenged the validity of the will, citing procedural irregularities and her own removal from the trust. The legal standoff quickly turned bitter. The Presley family, once so publicly united in legacy building, was suddenly mired in court filings and allegations. Riley, still reeling from her mother's death, was now pitted against her grandmother in a battle over control, image, and millions of dollars. Behind closed doors, there was heartbreak. But in public, Riley remained poised. The press speculated on family tensions, but Riley kept her statements measured and focused. Eventually, the dispute was settled quietly out of court in May 2023. As part of the agreement, Priscilla received $1,400,000 in legal fees and was granted a non-managerial role as a special advisor to the estate. With the dust settled, Riley emerged as the clear successor, not just in legal terms, but in public perception. She was young, media-savvy, and determined to protect her grandfather's legacy. In an interview with Vanity Fair, she acknowledged the upheaval, but added, "She was a huge part of creating my grandfather's legacy. All she wants is to love and protect Graceland and the Presley family." And Riley meant every word. She didn't see herself as an heiress, she saw herself as a guardian. Her inheritance included full control over Graceland, a 15% stake in Elvis's intellectual property, and a leadership role in the estate's future. She didn't plan to sell, dismantle, or dilute the brand. She planned to honor it. Fans noticed. Under Riley's watch, Graceland events carried a sense of authenticity and respect. Elvis's image remained carefully curated. No cheap licensing deals, no exploitative documentaries. Riley wasn't cashing in, she was holding the line. Yet even with Riley in the spotlight, there were two more heirs quietly waiting in the wings: Harper and Finley Lockwood, Lisa Marie's teenage twin daughters. Still minors at the time of their mother's death, the twins were legally entitled to equal shares of the Presley Trust. Media coverage focused largely on Riley, but behind the scenes, legal guardians and trustees were carefully structuring the twins' future roles in the estate. If all remains intact, Harper and Finley will likely assume partial control of their shares when they reach adulthood, just as Lisa Marie once did. So now, the Presley fortune isn't just about Elvis. It's about three young women, each from a different generation, who've inherited a legacy worth hundreds of millions and are charged with protecting something far more fragile than money: Elvis's name, his myth, and his place in history. But she wasn't the only heir. Elvis's legacy would also fall into the hands of two young twins, and the media barely noticed. The silent heirs, Harper and Finley. At just 14 years old, Harper Vivian Ann and Finley Aaron Love Lockwood found themselves in the middle of one of the most valuable and emotionally fraught estates in American pop culture. The sudden death of their mother, Lisa Marie Presley, in early 2023 thrust them into a spotlight they had never sought, and a legacy most people could never imagine. While much of the media attention focused on their older half-sister Riley Keough and her legal battle with Priscilla Presley, Harper and Finley were quietly confirmed as beneficiaries of the same trust that governs Graceland and Elvis Presley Enterprises. Their inclusion was automatic, legally sealed by the structure of Lisa Marie's estate. But what wasn't automatic was how they'd grow into their role and when. The trust, still shrouded in legal discretion, was designed to prevent early access to large sums of money. Based on the precedent set by Lisa Marie's own inheritance in 1993, Harper and Finley are expected to gain full access to their share of the Presley fortune once they reach age 25 or 30. Until then, their interests are overseen by trustees, individuals who manage the estate's financial assets, legal affairs, and revenue streams generated from Elvis's brand. That revenue is no small number. The Presley estate, valued at an estimated $500 million, continues to generate income from Graceland tourism, licensing deals, merchandise, and streaming royalties. Even without managerial control, the twins are already multimillionaires on paper. But unlike typical celebrity heirs, their inheritance isn't tied to flashy social media posts or product lines. It's tied to one of the most enduring names in music history. Despite this, Harper and Finley have remained almost entirely out of the public eye. Raised largely away from Hollywood's chaos, their privacy has been fiercely guarded, first by Lisa Marie and now by those overseeing the estate. Since their mother's passing, the girls have been living with their father, Michael Lockwood, who was granted full custody after a prolonged and often painful custody battle. While their older sister Riley has become the estate's public figurehead, Harper and Finley represent the future of Elvis's bloodline. Insiders say they are being kept away from estate operations, not out of exclusion, but protection. They are, after all, still children navigating grief, adolescence, and a world that will always associate them with a grandfather they never met. Documents filed in Los Angeles County confirmed their equal shares in the estate, right alongside Riley. Those documents also signaled an important shift in how the Presley legacy is managed. For the first time in decades, it's being passed down entirely through Elvis's grandchildren. There are no managers, no corporate outsiders, just blood. Yet, as secure as their financial future may be, the emotional weight of that inheritance is something no amount of money can cushion. Harper and Finley are growing up under the enormous shadow of not one but two towering legacies, Elvis and Lisa Marie. One was a myth, the other their mother. What role the twins will eventually play in Graceland's future is still unclear. Some speculate they may take more active roles in Elvis Presley Enterprises when they reach adulthood, joining Riley in overseeing the brand. Others believe they may choose entirely different paths, private lives, free from the constant echoes of fame and fortune. What's undeniable is this: they are part of the Presley dynasty, and one day they will hold real power over a cultural empire that stretches across music, film, fashion, and American history itself. But even as Harper and Finley's future seemed all but secured, not every heir to Elvis's bloodline was embraced by the family or the estate. One name, rarely spoken in public, was completely left out of the inheritance. And the reason why has remained a painful and deeply personal secret until now. Yet not everyone in the family walked away with millions. In fact, one person was left completely out, and the reason why is heartbreaking. The forgotten grandson and the untold tragedy. There was one Presley heir the public rarely saw, Benjamin Storm Keogh, the only son of Lisa Marie Presley and the only grandson of Elvis himself. With piercing blue eyes that uncannily resembled the king's, Benjamin carried more than just the Presley name. He carried the weight of its legacy. Born in 1992, Benjamin lived most of his life under the radar, carefully shielded by his mother from the pressures of fame. Yet, the resemblance to Elvis was so striking that it often drew gasps when people saw him. Even Lisa Marie once admitted in interviews that looking at her son sometimes felt like looking directly into her father's face. "He was the spitting image of Elvis," she once said. "It was just so overwhelming at times." But Benjamin was never drawn to the spotlight. He dabbled in music, tried to find his footing as a creative, and even signed a $5 million record deal with Universal at one point, but he never released an album. According to those close to him, Benjamin was private, thoughtful, and deeply introspective. And while the Presley name opened doors, it also came with shadows that were hard to escape. In July 2020, Benjamin died by self-harm at the age of 27. The news sent shockwaves not only through the Presley family but across the world. For a family already marked by tragedy, Benjamin's passing was uniquely devastating. Lisa Marie was said to be completely heartbroken, inconsolable, and beyond devastated, according to a family spokesperson. She withdrew from public life for an extended period. Elvis's fans, many of whom had only seen Benjamin in a few photographs, mourned as if they'd lost a direct connection to the king. From a legal standpoint, Benjamin was listed as a beneficiary of the same trust that governed Elvis Presley Enterprises and Graceland. He stood to inherit a share of an empire worth hundreds of millions. However, because he died without heirs of his own, it's widely assumed that his portion of the estate was quietly redistributed among his siblings, Riley, Harper, and Finley. This loss brings more than an inherently emotional crater. It is an emotional crater within the Presley family. Riley, the oldest sister, has expressed little verbally, but with raw honesty, it comes out. In a tribute post on what would have been Benjamin's 28th birthday, she wrote, "Not an hour goes by where I don't think of you and miss you. It's been 2 months since you left, and I still can't cry because the pain is too overwhelming." Benjamin's absence curtails the family narrative, which is the Presley legacy. Born into a family so obsessed by photographs, songs, and myths, he was the mute, quiet observer, the one who chased not the spotlight but bore its weight. No business association with his name, no nothing of a tell-all type interview, no documentary. Just empty nightmare silence and the hanging feeling of a young man who was never good enough. The estate, with all its shining branding and financial complications, too rarely mentions him. Documents list beneficiaries, court filings list assets, but less and less is found when it comes to Benjamin's name. It's almost like folding his story quietly instead into the background, preserved only in family memory and a few rare public mentions. Yet, in the Presley saga, Benjamin remains a poignant symbol, not of excess or power or inheritance, but of the emotional toll such a legacy can take. For every dollar the estate earns, for every tour ticket sold at Graceland, there is a cost that can't be measured in money. And still, despite the tragedy, the lawsuits, and the family fractures, Elvis Presley's fortune continues to expand, decades after his death. What's happening now behind the scenes is turning one of music's greatest legacies into an unstoppable financial engine. The question is, how is this even possible? But even after decades of chaos, lawsuits, and heartbreak, Elvis's fortune is still growing. Here's how it all adds up. The empire Elvis never saw coming. Elvis Presley may have died in 1977, but his fortune never did. In fact, it exploded. What started as a modest estate, one burdened by mismanagement and debt, has evolved into a posthumous empire worth over $500 million. And the wildest part? It just keeps growing. At the heart of this empire is Graceland, the Memphis mansion Elvis purchased in 1957 for $100,000. Back then, it was just a home. Today, it's a tourist juggernaut, drawing over 600,000 visitors a year and generating more than $10 million annually in revenue. Every ticket, every guided tour, every souvenir sold in the gift shop funnels directly into the Presley estate. But Graceland is only the beginning. Elvis Presley Enterprises, EPE, manages a sprawling portfolio of intellectual property rights, licensing deals, and music royalties. From vinyl reissues to themed casinos, clothing lines, and even hologram tours, Elvis's image continues to make money long after his final performance. In 2023 alone, Elvis earned $23 million, according to Forbes' list of highest-paid deceased celebrities. Streaming plays a huge part in this revival. On platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, songs like Suspicious Minds and Can't Help Falling in Love have racked up hundreds of millions of plays, each one delivering royalties back to the estate. And because digital distribution has fewer overhead costs than physical media, the estate's profit margins are larger than ever before. Modern fans are streaming Elvis more now than in the last 2 decades. But the estate isn't just passively collecting checks, it's making strategic moves too. In recent years, EPE has partnered with film studios, tech companies, and global retailers to extend the Elvis brand in bold new directions. Baz Luhrmann's 2022 biopic starring Austin Butler was more than a cinematic tribute, it was a calculated expansion of the Presley mythos. The film reignited global interest in Elvis, sending album sales, merch, and digital downloads skyrocketing. That spike didn't just pay off artistically, it was a financial windfall. And there's more on the horizon. EPE has begun exploring AI-driven music experiences, immersive digital exhibitions, and augmented reality apps for fans to tour Graceland virtually. These initiatives aren't nostalgia. They're next-generation brand building. They ensure that Elvis isn't just a memory from a dusty past, but a living, evolving part of pop culture. Behind the scenes, a complex web of trusts, co-executors, and advisors oversee the estate's finances. Riley Keough, as the current public face of the family, holds a symbolic and legal role in its management. Priscilla, after years of legal disputes, now serves as a paid advisor, ensuring continuity between past and present. The younger heirs, Harper and Finley, remain in the wings, their future shares waiting quietly as the money grows. Perhaps the most astonishing fact is this: Elvis was worth only $5 million at the time of his death. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $20 million today. That number pales in comparison to what the estate has built since. Thanks to savvy management, brand expansion, and a global fan base that never let go, the king of rock and roll has become the king of posthumous earnings. And yet, Elvis never saw any of this coming. He never witnessed the streaming revolution. He never imagined his home would become a pilgrimage site. He never foresaw a world where his granddaughter would inherit his empire, or where his image would be sold in NFTs and digital experiences. Still, the numbers don't lie. The Presley estate has become one of the most successful celebrity estates in history, rivaling even Michael Jackson's and Prince's. As the estate continues to adapt and innovate, Elvis's fortune shows no signs of slowing down. He may have left the building, but his empire? It's only just begun. And with every passing year, new fans discover his music, his films, and the mystique of his legacy. Elvis isn't just frozen in time. He's a brand that continues to evolve with each generation. Whether through vinyl, virtual reality, or a voice that never fades, Elvis Presley remains one of the most profitable legends in entertainment history. Elvis Presley didn't leave his family with bags of cash, but he left them something far more valuable. A name, a brand, and a story people still pay to see. Graceland isn't just a house. It's a symbol of one man's rise, fall, and eternal fame. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Presley family fortune, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And check out the next video on your screen to explore more stories behind the world's most iconic stars and the money they left behind.